Sharmishta's come all the way from Mumbai. And she's come to this awfully wretched city in an awfully wretched weather. And that, I think, is possibly exactly what a poet is all about. They write against the odds. They read against the odds. They read against the grain. And they speak to us in ways that most other kinds of writers don't. For me, I have just been told a really interesting story about this book and its past lost lives, which presumably at some point we will hear someone tell us. But what I just want to say is that it's an unusual thing when a book 30 years after its first life can be read, appreciated, spoken of with such excitement that it needs to be brought back. It needs to be read again. That kind of real interest driving the return of a book, that is really very unusual. And I'm very glad we could facilitate this return of book one. We did think about, changing the title, maybe think whether this was actually the right way to represent it. But I think in the end, this is the book, and I think a few minor edits, a little change here and there, an addition of a little introduction, but that's really all that has changed, and this gorgeous cover is now here. But that's it really. Otherwise, it is that book that came to life 3 decades ago. I was also thinking that since you're going to have this conversation where we're going to talk about the poetry, about Sharmishta's writing, really, the only thing that I wanted to add was that this, for us as publishers, my colleagues are here as well, this poet, this person, is just very special. And I think the writing, all that you're going to say about it, I think it's all, the beauty of it stems from the fact of who she is and what she is, her commitment to her relationships, to her friendships, to even her publishing partners. Like every moment of everything we've experienced in the last few years when we worked with her, published her previous book, Extinctions, has been about the warmth and sincerity and concern that friendship brings out, not just what a writer shows to professionals. So all around, it's just been so marvelous. And I'm just so glad you're here and that we're doing this. And we can talk about this book and have a really lively conversation about it. I'm going to ask Jeebesh and Somak to come up. And has Somak vanished? No, you're there. Okay. To come up and onto the stage. And then I'm going to ask Sharmishta to join them. And then Shivani will take
red ribbon.
Yes. Thank you.
Okay, so I want to start by saying a deep, deep thanks to Karthika for bringing this book out and giving it a new life. It's been a very, very important thing for me. Also, I want to thank Saurabh Garge, who designed, I think, what is an incredibly beautiful cover. Want to thank Amrita and Atrey for working quite tirelessly on the book. Also want to thank Jeebesh and Somak for coming to have this conversation with me. So what we'll do is I'll read a bit in the beginning, then we'll talk, and then I'll read a bit again, and we'll talk again. That's how we've sort of planned it. So I'll read for about 10 minutes. Tornado. On the day the tornado came, my grandfather saw a buffalo fly through the air. Not gently, its large body resting on the flow of the breeze, but sudden and swift, like an afternoon sleep's oversized dream. It was so close when it went by that he could have reached out and touched its frightened face. My grandfather, in a long white shirt and dhoti, was on his way back from a walk. As the breeze intensified, his dhoti swirled around his legs. The black umbrella he also used as a cane was sucked away from his hand. There were red and yellow flowers broken from their stalks and flying over the fields. The flower-filled wind threw my grandfather against a banyan tree. On all fours, little by little, he made his way home. On the way, he saw a cow on a peepal tree and small silver fish on bushes. He passed the neighborhood pond, from which this wind had drained all the water and hurled it on the land. The pond was empty now, a large bowl of weeds and silt. All night, the wind. All night, the sound of falling trees, breaking branches, dancing twigs, flowers hurled against one another. In the lantern light, full of shadows, my grandfather sat silently. No other sound, no other action, except the winds, had any meaning. So he made only the most necessary of movements, stretching a leg, waving away a moth, leaning his head against a wall. His mind hovered in a region beyond fear, beyond wonder. The wind had entered him and had begun to move him inside, gently but powerfully, a slow wave forming from the sea of his blood. A window flew open towards midnight, and my grandfather, looking out, saw a large crystal chandelier floating through the dark, all its swaying pieces tinkling loudly against each other. The zamindar, my great-grandfather, was slowly losing his riches to the wind. The chandelier was like a star flung down from the sky, stark against the tornado night blackness. The world had changed, thought my grandfather. In the relentless wind, things had been cut loose from their moorings. The chandelier was a low-hanging star, the buffalo a bird, the pond a crater, the land a lake. The wind transformed things, gave them new names, and not only new names, it gave them new possibilities. The chandelier knew how it felt to be a star, and the silver fish what it was to be a bird on a green-smelling bush. My grandfather opened his eyes in the tornado to a new vision of the world. He saw that only things loosened from their moorings became truly real, like a ship throwing off anchor to set sail. When my grandfather came to the city, he carried the wind with him. In the big city house, he was the one who breathed most easily, sitting on the bed with his back straight, his hands on his knees, silent. There were large balconies in the house, but still too many walls, and the wind entered here only in small wisps, like a child's excited breath. Once, only once, it had knocked over a glass.
Thanks, Sharmistha, for inviting me to comment. You know, like when she wrote to me, I thought it was a big mistake because then I read this line in this book and I remembered why it may not be a mistake. Where it writes, it's called mistake, and it says, sometimes I mistake everybody for the one I love. So I thought maybe there is a perimeter that I am not getting. So I decided that okay. So I read this book in 1995. Not because I bought it or anything. I was in a friend's house. He's a filmmaker who is a common friend. I didn't know that they were common friends then. So he gave me this book and said it's a self-published book. And I was in his house, not doing much those days. So why don't you have a go at it? So I read it. And it left an impression. I don't know what I thought then. I don't have a memory of what I thought then, but I had a memory of the book. It left a deep impression of something that was against the grain of its own time, in a sense that in 1995, I don't know whether we all know it or not, it was a kind of an euphoric, all kinds of euphorias and all kinds of subterranean currents have been unleashed and the society was transforming itself. And here was this book which certainly gave a sense of not being rushed to read. So the book's quality I remember then was that it had a rhythm, and it was I'd shared that rhythm with him. Okay, it's nice, but it was not rushing me to read it. It was just there. So that quality of it kind of endeared, and I think that stayed with me at some level. When I was reading it now, and after that I met Sharmishta many times, but as an occasion, as a incredible associative, critical constellation builder of critical thinking on writing and actually how to think with writing. So it never struck me that this book was hers in that way. So it remained a book independent of the author. So when I read this now, I understood something why I have this memory of this disjointed, not to be rushed book, because it is actually about someone growing up in that time. Maybe I was similar age. And seeing disappearance, seeing a certain kind of fragility of time, and trying to hold on to it, and not ideologically. So, and in that holding on to that, like a brisk nature of time around her. And it's interesting that she read Tornado, and I would like her in the next reading to read the text Bodies, because I think that will get a sense of what she was trying to make sense, the deep current of fragility of life. And so the book is filled with disease, cremation, bodies going wrong. But somewhere it is not someone thinking disappearance as reality, but that you can through it come to a wisdom. So there is two directions that I would kind of pose, and that we'll try to build the discussion on. One is this question of affection. Annette, she writes very beautifully of money call in this paragraph. There is this very difficult thing of holding on to affection, and as an artist, I know it's one of the most difficult struggle is to keep your affection. Critique comes easy, the politics of critique comes easy, narrations of alienation come easy, but affection is the most difficult field as a creative practitioner, to hold on to affection. Not just because affections give rise to, with affection you have to write something back into yourself, but also be vulnerable completely with someone else. And this ability to hold, so there is a kind of a poetry and a prose of affection in this, and I think that's what I thought that why she likes Money Call, and I didn't know that you written the script for Nazar, which is one of my very beautiful films. That Money also was this cinema of affection, trying to figure out how do you see that, even that simple pot in a way that can make me part of my visceral reality. It will bring me close to that reality.
Thanks, Sharmishta. I think, Jeebesh, you have put it so well that I'm not going to sort of make a long comment. But just to give some context, I read Sharmishta's book in 2012, I think, 5 Movements in Praise, that came out, I think, around that time.
Yeah.
And I reviewed it, and that's how I got to know Sharmishta. And my response was a little more prosaic, because I was working as a book critic and publisher at some points of my life, and I found this book which I was completely baffled by. And when we talk about permeating borders and dissolving borders, I thought this is language which has lost all its moorings from how we see it, and it has become something else. It's neither poetry nor fiction, and I know publishers have to put a category behind, so this is saying poetry here, but to me it's a language of twilight. It's a language which doesn't rest in one state. It's constantly changing, and you don't know at what point its texture will change. There is this very famous old Bengali language, ancient language called Shundha Bhasha, which is actually the language of the evening or twilight. And when I read Sharmishta's book at that stage, I felt that sort of hypnotic sense of getting involved with a book and seeing the world in a different way. I think to me, the visual appeal of the book was very, very strong. This is 5 Movements in Praise. And now that I read book 1, I know where this has all come from. I see a continuity of thought, a continuity in the way of engaging with the world. And I had not idea that you were working with Manikal in that way, and that your language is also very cinematic, very visual, while it's also very sensuous, all of that. I think, so to me, to find this borderlessness between poetry and fiction, and you also talk about other borders. I think partition is a big theme where you talk about the subcontinent and people having to move and migrate and cross over. And your migration to the West as well temporarily, and staying there and looking at a culture. So I think this rootlessness is what really attracted me to it. And I know this is a story which is told by a woman who's talking about her body, about her upbringing, about her family. But at some point, you start losing that sense of gender and particularity, and you become almost immersed in a sea of feelings. And that's how I sort of read and responded to your book. I think the other thing that I also want to emphasize here is 5 Movements in Praise has very powerful photographs. And after reading W.J. Sebald many years ago, and this was the first time I was encountering, and now everybody's copying this form, and very, very lesser writers are also copying it in many ways.
Yes, yes.
But in Sharmishta's book, I actually saw how language and text and image work together, and invite you to not only read the text, but read the image as well. And I was also an art critic, so thinking of art in that sense. I think I have 2 sort of questions for you, or rather sort of comments for you to reflect on. One is, first of all, your relationship with the past. I think one of my favorite portions in this book is ancestors, because I'm obsessed with my ancestors, who I come from, and not in a very sort of, atavistic way, but in a very sort of philosophical way, where we come from ourselves and not just ourselves. Our DNAs come from other people and all of that. And there's a line here where you say, it's the opening actually, the ancestors gather around me sometimes in my solitude. They come when I turn my face halfway back and give the past a transient, loving look. And then you say, there is no nostalgia, the heart moves merely at the fact of change. And I find the stillness of this belief in the absolute pastness of the past, but also reckoning with the past, the sort of slight duality of this, very, very beautiful. I want you to reflect on this sentiment. And also to talk about, how images come into your work. Like, I think 5 Movements in Praise is the book it is, because it has the images in it. It's not just the text, but you are engaging the reader also with the photographs. And that gradual progression from this one layer of thinking to multiple layers of looking and feeling the world. So these are the 2 propositions I think I want to present before you.
Can I say something? I'm listening to the 3 of you and thinking how beautifully you speak about the writing, and how every word is so almost visible when you speak it. And then I thought, but why is poetry so invisible in this world of ours? At least in the language we all operate in, which is English, really. I know that Urdu and various other Indian languages have a very vibrant sort of experience of writing, reading, sharing poetry. So how do you even continue? Do you feel that there is enough that you get out of this? Or do you feel sometimes that invisibility that is forced upon poets in English in India?
As you probably know, Karthik, I mean, we've probably talked about this, you and I. The answer to that is I don't give a damn. I mean, why should I? You know? I've been working for 25 or 30 years, and it's one of my core ways of being in the world. So why would I abandon it? And the other thing is, it appears to be invisible. That's the mysterious thing about it. I mean, I think poetry has always been, anywhere in the world, not the main modality of what people want out of literature. More people will be reading novels, right? But I think that poetry is read and appreciated and lived by many people, and we just don't know it. I mean, when Jeebesh is speaking, when Somak is speaking about my work, to me, that's incredibly poetic in itself. I mean, I would love to have our conversation reproduced. I don't know, maybe we can put it on Almost Island or something, you know, really. So there are people out there who are reading and who are, I would say, more than understanding you. They are opening up new ways of me to look at my own self. You know, because many of the things that they said, I don't look at myself like that. Because you don't look at yourself from the outside. You don't know everything that's coming out of this. And if you did, you'd be a terrible writer, you know. So, yeah, my answer is there's enough people who love poetry. There's enough people who live a life of poetry. And also with Indian poetry in English, one thing to remember is it has an international side. So, you know, one has readers outside India and one travels, and because it's English, it can be understood in many other countries. So that's there. Having said that, I mean, the greatest satisfaction is to be understood, obviously, in one's own culture. That's for sure. But I don't think I've ever felt that there's so few people who are reading me, why should I write? Because A, that's not true. You've made so much possible for me yourself by bringing out these 2 books, which, as we know, a lot of people have been reading. And the thing is, even if they weren't, I mean, I would still write. There's a very famous, I won't mention the name because he's extremely well-known, very, very well-known Bengali poet who said to me the other day that I have decided I'm not going to publish anything anymore. And I said, why is that? Because he said, I want to be free. I don't want publishers to tell me what to do. I don't want them to wait for me. I want to write as if there's no one out there waiting to see my work. That's the best way to write a poem, he said. So that's where a poem comes from. It's not written towards an audience, I would say.
It shares that with mathematics.
What? What did he say? Jeebesh, I didn't hear you.
It shares this thing with mathematics. Mathematicians have this same. If you meet a mathematician...
Mic, Jeebesh, mic.
No, it's not mic.
I can't hear you.
It's not micable. I'm just saying if you talk to mathematicians, they're ignitable, they can... But they don't really not doing the mathematics that it will be. And if you're a very good mathematician, they're doing it for 400 years, you know, something. So the temporal scale of publishing and poetry may not work together sometimes. The scales are different sometimes. And I think it's in art and poetry, many of the practices, that scale is always disjointed.
Yeah, yeah. No questions. Okay.
please forgive my ignorance. This is the first time I'm listening to your poems. And one thing, it's a very specific question. When you read out Sari, at one point of time you were talking that the dupatta is expanding into the thing. I understand the tribal culture coming into, and you are incorporating it into the sari, but what really, I'm very curious to know, what really made you write that the dupatta is expanding to the sari? Is it because you're bringing in the Islam metaphor, just following up, or is it what was really in your mind when you were using this?
Well, actually, I'd done a lot of research into how the sari as we wear it today came about. So it's actually based on historical fact as much as we can know it from the past. And when I thought about that history, I thought of a woman's body just getting more and more covered up. And it just seemed to me a closing down in some way.
But since you're a Bengali, we know that Thakurbari influence and how the draping was more cosmopolitan with the Western culture, that too comes in. And it's, I don't know, I might be wrong, because you're a poet. I can't expect historiography of the sari from a poet. But I was just wondering, even this discourse could come in, because it was 5 yards. Is it that the dupatta expands? I'm talking about facts. When you were tracing the history, was it the dupatta expanding to the
historically, sari? Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
This is a very personal question. Reading you over the years, the thought just came to me just now that I can suddenly see two kinds or two groups of writers. One group of writers I read and I learn things that I don't know. And then there's another group of writers, you included in that, who reveal to me what I already know. And your observation is so acute that as one looks, as you look, one sees things afresh and things open inside you. This is my observation, or the thought that came to me just now. My question is, does this make sense to you? And do you, when you read other writers, have some sense of this?
I think, every reader has their own way of putting it, as you are. For me, no, when I read different writers, the experience is very, very different with each one. As for my own work, what you're saying, I would just say, when you write a book and you finish it, you let it go into the world, and it can go anywhere. People may read it in multiple ways, according to where they are placed in the world, in their life, what is their relationship to themselves, So I don't know, I can only listen to what you as a reader are saying and say, all right, that's something, I hear you, but that's all.
It's a question, but it's also something I've been wondering about for some time. I'm an artist, so in my practice also, I've been thinking, and I haven't read the book, I'll be honest. But whatever I heard today while you were reading, I was thinking, is there a space inside a person which one cannot touch, in terms of making art or writing something, bringing it into a form? What is the threshold? Because when I think of like making something and there's something troubling me, but I hold myself sometimes that this is too personal, or this is like a conversation with my father or something, it might change that experience if I put it into a form, and then obviously that form will be seen by someone. I don't know if this was covered earlier, I stepped in late, but I was just, if you have any thoughts on that, I don't know.
That's actually a very deep question. What I would say to that for myself is, no, there's nothing that I wouldn't touch inside me to write. There may be some things that I can't touch or I'm not able to touch, which is a different thing. So some years ago I had cancer, and many people had asked me, so are you going to write, something from it, about it? And I used to say, no. And it was almost too close to me to have been through something fatal, But now it's almost been 10 years, and I want to go back to it. And I've begun writing some poems, from that space I was in. So there are some things that you may not be able to access for different reasons. But as an artist, the more you push, the more you will get. And I think what you're talking about, I think the distinction that you have to make is, I don't want to go there because it's too personal. Now, if it's too personal, it's not art. The whole thing about writing a poem or making an artwork is you push, and you can go so far that that personal thing is no longer recognizable. So no one, you are not there to reveal to someone's curiosity. You're there to make something much larger than that. And that's what art is. I think we're done here.
Yeah, I think we can close. Kartika, would you like to say something?
Do you want to end with just one little bit of one poem?
What?
End with poetry.
You know what I actually thought, if you don't mind, this is not published by Context, but I actually thought I'd end with a poem from the book before, which was done by Speaking Tiger, which is verse poetry. And I'm just going to sit here and read it. Okay, go up again.
Is the light okay?
Huh?
Is the light okay?
Yeah. This is the first poem from a book called The Gods Came Afterwards, which was published in 2019, which also Somak reviewed, didn't you? Somak, yeah. Make broadness from narrowness. Lead us. We see nothing behind, nothing ahead. These worlds are broad above, beyond our knowing. The great river plains open and descend slowly from west to east, beyond our knowing, us. Doctor, suture me from narrowness to broadness. All the suns, all the dawns, all the waters rise and pass in broadness. Our bodies move over this land, rising and falling. Broadness, stretch out our skies and dawns so we can walk out of ourselves. Doctor, move me from dark spaces of invented light. I do not know just what it is that I am like. Broadness, open for us. Unharness our days. Let all boundaries be distant so we can wander far in our unknowing.
Thank you, Sharmishta, Jeebesh, Somak, everybody. It was a lovely evening. Thank you.
Thank you, Karthika.
Thank you.
Thank you.